I can't believe I've been making YouTube videos for over 2 years and I haven't even tried to make this video before. But due to popular request, today I'm going to be ranking every Skylander game from worst to best. You all know the 6 Skylander games: Spyro's Adventure, Giants, Swap Force, Trap Team, Superchargers and Imaginators. And while some people prefer these games over others, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Just to let you know, I won't be going that in depth to these games, because I'll save that for a review series in the future. So of course I won't be covering every aspect of the games, I'll just be going over the important parts. I'll be ranking these games on a ton of different things: the new Skylanders, the gameplay, the graphics, the story, and tons of other things. And also, if your favourite game is down at the bottom, do not be upset. I can clarify that I love every single Skylanders game. I don't dislike any of them, I just prefer some over others. So with all that said, I hope you enjoy, and let's get right into it. This might come as a shocker for some people, but in 6th place, I have Skylanders Superchargers. Now before you go raging in the comments, I do like this game. There is just a lot of aspects of it that I really found underwhelming. For starters, the Skylanders. There is only 2 new Skylanders for each element, except for Light and Dark, who only have 1 Skylander each. And to make matters worse, I don't even like the roster that much. Especially since almost half of the characters are just older characters we've seen before, but with some sort of new gimmick to try and make them unique. And honestly, I don't really like many of them. I do like Tidal Wave Gilgrunt and Hurricane Jetvac for example, who I think are better than the originals, but apart from that, I just didn't enjoy it. Now let's move on to the game itself. Superchargers has one big gimmick, and of course, that's the vehicles. Every Supercharger has their own vehicle, and some of them are land, sky or sea, depending on what element they are. And I've talked about this a lot already, but I hate the vehicle sections. There are very few of them that I actually enjoyed, and most of them were very long and not fun to play at all. Honestly, I would have liked the game so much more if there was some more platforming and some more bosses that didn't have the vehicles included. There's a lot of things that Superchargers does right, but the vehicle sections are not one of them. But the design of the game is fantastic, and I love the music, and the levels are some of my favourites out of any Skylanders game. And the story actually makes sense as well. There's a specific reason why you have to go to a level, and it makes you feel like you're actually there for a reason. But there are some really important parts of the game that they just didn't get right, and that's why it's 6th place on my list. I hope you guys aren't too mad. But on to the next game. At number 5 on my list is Skylanders Imaginators. This game gets far too much hate, a lot more than it deserves, that's for sure. Now of course, there are some things about this game that everyone hates, myself included, but there's also a lot of things that this game deserves more appreciation for. For example, the new Skylanders. There is tons of these guys, and pretty much all of them are really cool and some of my favourites out of any Skylanders game. And I love how they brought back the villains from Trap Team. That was a very nice touch, and I think that the game should get more love for that. And let's not forget about this game's main gimmick, creating your very own Skylander. I think people forget about this gimmick because it's very useless. The senses are incredibly overpowered, so you're never really going to need to use the Imaginators for anything. But those 2 things are the only things that are really going for Imaginators. Everything else sucks in my opinion. The levels are so bland and uninspired, and the story is just downright stupid. The plot for Imaginators makes me quite sad. It feels like it was written by a 5-year-old, and that's not cool. One moment, you're collecting parts for a Jack-in-a-Box that's used to suck up a vortex. Next thing you know, you're shooting a giant guacamole monster. And then after that, you're baking a cake for Chaos. For Christ's sake, this just makes no sense. And whilst there's lots more to talk about when it comes to Imaginators, I'm going to leave it there for now. But I've been dying to make a review of this game properly, and I'll cover more things then. But on to number 4. At number 4, we have Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. I'm not sure how you guys are going to react to this part of the video, so I'm just going to lock my doors for the next couple days. While Spyro's Adventure is a fantastic game that's really fun to replay, compared to some of the other games, it really hasn't aged well. First of all, the game is filled with glitches and bugs and terrible camera angles that make me want to stop playing. And I always hated the fact that you can't jump in this game. You have to use these dumb bounce pads, and it makes the levels look a lot less natural. And speaking of levels, this game has the most amount out of any Skylanders game, and that's fantastic. They all have great designs and different themes to them. It's a shame that the levels themselves all feel the exact same, just dumb pushing blocks and turtles puzzles, and mindless spamming of your primary button when fighting enemies. Oh yeah, that's another thing that I have a problem with in this game, the combat. This game is mind-numbingly easy for almost the entire time. I reset all of my Spyro's Adventure characters when I replayed this game, and never once did I even reach red health. That's really saying something when level 3 of Trap Team actually gave me a lot of difficulty on my first try. But that's enough about the negatives for now. The music is incredible. I could just sit and jam out to it all day. And all the levels, as I said, have different themes, and it makes the Skylands feel very vast with tons of different places to explore. And you could say that this game is the most unique, since it's the first one, and it introduces tons of different mechanics that were kept for pretty much all of the games, like the elemental gates, the chests, the hat boxes, and tons of other things. To sum things up, I replayed this game recently, and I had an absolute blast doing it. But now, let's move on to number 3. At number 3, we have Skylanders Giants. I like Skylanders Giants because it kept the good things about Spyro's Adventure, whilst getting rid of some of the problems. I said some of the problems though. You still can't jump in this game, and it makes me sad. A lot of people say that Skylanders Giants is like an extension to Spyro's Adventure because there's less things to do. But the funny thing is, even though Giants has less content, I still enjoyed it way more than Spyro's Adventure. But let's talk about some negatives for now. First off, the main gimmick of Skylanders Giants is, giants. Except, these giants do almost nothing to the game. While Superchargers can drive vehicles, and the Swap Force can swap parts, giants are just big boys. They can throw boulders, move islands closer, jump into pits, and squash chompies by walking on them, and that is pretty much it. If it weren't for an occasional treasure chest or hat, these giants would be completely useless when playing through the game. We talked about the lack of content a minute ago, so let's just circle back to that. There is a lot less to do in Giants than there was to do in Spyro's Adventure. There's a lot less levels, and the story is a lot shorter. And whilst they did add the arena fights in this game, it's not enough. This game felt pretty lackluster in a lot of ways, including the characters. There are some very memorable and very awesome Skylanders in this game, but there's also some characters like Fright Rider, Sprocket, and Chill, and the only reason you know these characters is because no one likes them. Also, another small problem I have with this game is the fact that there's no expansion packs. The expansion packs were one of the best parts of Spyro's Adventure, and they're just not in this one. It's weird. Giants is better and worse than Spyro's Adventure at the same time. Okay, let's move on to my second favourite Skylanders game, which is of course Skylanders Trap Team. This game is bursting with content left, right and centre. There are so many new and fun things to do in this game, and the main story is very enjoyable too. Trap Team is constantly clashing with Swap Force when it comes to my favourite gimmick. In this game, you get to defeat certain villains, and then trap them in these really cool looking crystal traps, and then you get to play as them in the game. Now I won't lie, this is a fantastic gimmick, but they could have done a lot more with it. For example, you can't upgrade any of your villains, and they're pretty much useless apart from the villain missions. Honestly, they should have had this gimmick in Superchargers, because the Skylanders in this game are so good that you'd never even want to use the villains. Yes, I just dissed Superchargers. Most of the characters suck in that game, let's be honest. There's a very large amount of brand new, unique and incredibly interesting characters in this game that all look awesome. Funnily enough, almost every single one of my top 10 favourite Skylanders is from Trap Team. If that doesn't show you how good the characters are, then I don't know what will. Trap Team's plot is another thing that's great about the game. They introduce a brand new group of villains called the Doom Raiders, and these are some really well designed bad guys that you'll have a lot of fun fighting. Unless it's Wolfgang. Actually, speaking of fighting, the combat in this game is on point. The nightmare difficulty is actually nightmarish, and hard mode is difficult enough as it is. I'm not gonna lie, the hub world Skylanders Academy is a little bit too big for my liking. Especially since one of my biggest problems with Skylanders as a whole is the fact that the characters move far too slow. Of course, there are still so many things to talk about. I haven't even touched upon the fact that this game is the biggest cash grab out of them all, but that'll have to wait until a review. So let's go on to my favourite Skylanders game now. My number one favourite Skylander game is of course Skylanders Swap Force. I talk about the fact that I love Skylanders Swap Force a lot, but I don't really talk about why I love it too much, so that's what I'm going to do right now. Swap Force was the peak of the Skylanders series, getting the most copies sold out of any of the Skylander games. And it's clear to see why. This game is just straight up great. It's kinda weird to think that there was only a 1 year gap between Skylanders Giants, which looked awful, and Swap Force, which looks like heaven. And whilst this game isn't really that well known for the music, the level design and the story are very nice as well. And also, Swap Force finally introduces the ability to jump, which I felt was needed from the very start. It makes all the levels feel a lot more natural, and it makes exploring the levels a lot more fun. Speaking of exploring, this game has a buttload of collectibles to find in every single level. Now let's move on to the characters and the gimmicks. Swap Force has an incredible array of Skylanders, and most of them are very unique and fun to use. I love the roster because they're all so different from one another. There's an octopus pirate, a Chinese dragon, a vampire boxer, a tornado chicken, a gorilla with drills for legs. It's just incredible. And those characters I just mentioned are all part of a new elite team, the Swap Force, who have the ability to swap from top halves to bottom halves. And whilst this sounds cool on paper, and is pretty cool in game, I never actually found myself using it, because you only really need it for the dual elemental gates, and that's it. But it's still a cool gimmick in my opinion. This game overall is just so great in my opinion, and whilst there are some problems, like the lengths of the levels, it's overall just a really fun time. And of course I am desperate to review this game as well, and trust me, it'll come in time, just you wait. Well, there we are ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you enjoyed the video. It was a handful honestly, but it was very fun to make, and I hope you all agree with my opinions, or at least don't hate me for them. But as always, please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and make sure to comment down below what your favourite Skylander game is. But until next time, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.